While the Master Chief may be the mascot of the Halo series, some could argue they remember Halo more for the terrified foot soldiers of the Covenant, the iconic Grunts.
I just wet myself!
Known for their excellent humor, large numbers, and tendency to flee at even the slightest form of danger. In this evolution video, we're going to be taking a look at the Grunts' journey through Halo's history. Seeing as Halo is over 2 decades old, they've appeared in many forms, and there's a lot to cover. If you find yourself enjoying the video, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and even sharing the video around. Also, let me know what your favorite version of the Grunts are. We all have our favorites. And stay tuned to the end of the video to hear my impression of a Grunt, which I think is pretty good, but I'll let you be the judge of that. During the development of the first Halo game, it went through many different incarnations. First, it was an RTS game directly competing with Warcraft. Then it became something of a tactical, third-person shooter. It wasn't until the jump to Xbox when it was solidified as a first-person shooter.
Let me now unveil Xbox.
During this development period, a Bungie artist by the name of Shi Kai Wang, or simply Sheik, was told to come up with an idea for a common foot soldier, a Grunt. With the Covenant being inspired by nature, he based these Grunt units off of chimpanzees with long, spindly arms, short legs, and designed something that, while alien, was perhaps a bit too uniform and standard-looking. As a generic alien foot soldier, he was told to come up with something more unique. He experimented with adding a bit of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, one of his personal favorite franchises. He also added a bit of Crab, a bit more monkey, and he kept iterating and designing until a form that should be instantly familiar to all of us began to take shape. The Grunts' iconic backpacks and gas masks were eventually added to help give traits to separate it from other Covenant units, and orange and blue were chosen as the default color set. Prior to launch, the color was a bit brighter and even covered the gas masks, but this was changed just before release, and the Grunt we all know was born. A great design, and with the incredible voice work of Joe Staten, one of Bungie's writers, the little guy was an instant hit.
Nice job, guys! Cold fusion on me!
The Grunts are used as the Covenant's primary cannon fodder due to their ability to just breed like rabbits. They're optimal for sending into battle in large numbers. Their bodies are covered in a protective crustacean exoskeleton, and when shot, their blood is known to glow bright blue when exposed to oxygen, which can leave a hallway of dead Grunts looking a bit like a rave. An issue the Grunts unfortunately run into is, unlike other Milky Way species, the Grunts don't breathe oxygen. They breathe methane gas, which presents a problem for the little tykes. That's why the Covenant designed the armor of a Grunt to act as both protection and as their lifeline in oxygen-rich atmospheres. That cute little mask that looks a bit like a baby pacifier from a distance isn't just there for show. It allows the Grunts to breathe safe methane stored in the giant containers on their back that comes in 2 designs, a very unique pyramid and an almost snail-like shell. One of my personal favorite lines recorded by Joe Staten is the woe of a Grunt as he struggles to run with how clumsy and poorly fitted the Grunt's gear is.
Can't run with thing on back!
How's that?
In combat, the role of a Grunt is to not actually be dangerous or necessarily lethal to the player. That's the role of the elites and the jackals. The Grunt's role in combat was best described by Bungie as how your kid brother might play a shooter. In large numbers, the Grunt's constant peppering of the player's shields could make you vulnerable, which is where the more dangerous units like the elites could make their move to finish you off. If their commanders were killed, Grunts would often panic, throwing their arms up and fleeing in terror. In close environments, weapons like the assault rifle really shine, being able to keep them from running by recoiling them with a few well-placed shots, following up with the assault rifle's faster than normal melee speed. In wider environments, popping off a few headshots with the Magnum is the go-to. Grunts can be found patrolling, manning turrets, struggling to keep up with their elite commanders, and of course their favorite pastime, napping. Oh, the Grunts love napping. The Grunts of Halo CE came in many ranks. The Miners, the Grunt Majors, a higher tier of enemy with distinct red armor, and finally, the Spec Ops Grunts are found in dark armor, and are often found using fuel rod guns. The other Grunt ranks may be relatively harmless, but many checkpoints have been reset by the Spec Ops Grunts. One of the most famous grunts of the bunch has to be what is called the Thirsty Spec Ops Grunt, a noble warrior who can be found at the end of Halo's campaign, exclaiming that he worked up a big grunty thirst after taking down a bunch of Flood with a single plasma pistol.
Good thing that food nipple's waiting for me at the starship, cause man, if I worked up a big grunty thirst!
The food nipple he mentions became a running gag in the Halo community. What is a food nipple? Nobody knows for sure, but the grunts sure seem to love food nipple. This Easter egg grunt kickstarted a trend in the series of special dialogue grunts and enemies, each one as memorable as the last. The grunts were an instant hit. They were not just an outstanding enemy design for an award-winning shooter, they were a step forward for the shooter industry, a call to other developers to step up their game and begin breathing more life into their character animations and reactions to player choices. The grunts' first outing was an instant success, and it paved a long and successful road. The future looked bright for these little guys. With the smash success of Halo Combat Evolved in the bag, a sequel was inevitable. But like most Bungie projects, it seems, development was rough. Early on, Bungie looked towards more tactical shooters for inspiration, games with cover systems, leaning and the such. Much of the AI early on was also designed around suppression and tactical combat, more so than the out-in-the-open, semi-Quake-style plasma-dodging combat of the original Halo. Many of the Covenant units were designed to be more reactive to their environment and the player, climbing over crates, seeking cover, and pinning the player with suppressive fire. Prior to launch, things were changed up to make the game flow a bit more like a traditional Halo game, and this brings us to the new grunts. Halo 2's grunts saw a massive upgrade in quality over the first game. They have more detail in their textures and model, more animations and behaviors such as climbing crates, setting up turret encampments, and with comedian Brian Posehn joining the grunt cast, he and Joseph Staten provided players with a noble upgrade in grunt wisdom. The grunts of Halo 2 also now come with two different personalities. Joe Staten voiced what was called Grunt Crazy, while Brian voiced what was called Grunt Dopey. These two would be the voices heard babbling over gunfire in the campaign, and they're so delightful.
You big and dumb hairball, you want tasty grunt? Come get!
For once, me feel tall. Me enjoy while last. Me breathe gas, but still smell better than you.
In terms of their gameplay, the Halo 2 grunts fire faster projectiles and can often get caught in a loop of suppressing the player's last known position, making them a bit less mobile and intelligent than their original Halo incarnations. When combined with the lack of noticeable recoil or stunning when hitting them with shots, it can make the Halo 2 grunts feel a bit less responsive and intelligent than their original brothers. It's something that's hard to notice though, due to how much personality their increased production value gave them. The Halo 2 grunts also saw their original ranks return, such as the Minor, which was changed to more of a yellow color. The game also threw in two extra ranks for good measure: the Grunt Heavy, which was green, and the Grunt Ultra, which is, like its elite counterpart, wearing a white color coding. Unique to Halo 2 as well were level-exclusive grunts. On the gas mines of Threshold, a Forerunner research facility and recovery group cut themselves off from the Covenant, giving their workers arms and declaring the Covenant a lie. These heretic grunts on the mines are seen sporting their work equipment rather than traditional battle harnesses. These grunt heretics have their mouths exposed, biting down on a breathing apparatus. The heretics have no special ranks, instead sporting upgraded combat capabilities and almost never fleeing from combat. They are brave and defiant, willing to die for their cause, now knowing that the Covenant is a lie. Like Halo 1, a special grunt can be found, this time on the level Uprising. The courageous grunt from Halo 1 boasted proudly about the thirst he felt after beating the Flood. This grunt is extremely cowardly, unwilling to fight and begging to hide behind the player.
Brutes stinky bad. Me stay here, make sure no brutes come behind Mighty Arbiter.
Halo 2's campaign provided much insight into the Covenant, their beliefs, and how they operated. It's rather fitting then that it also expanded on the grunts themselves, letting the player fight alongside them in Arbiter missions and upping the comedy value when appropriate. It's also the last time players would see what I call the original grunt design, with their dark bluish skin, comically broad chests, gas masks with straps over their forehead and dark beady eyes. It's a design for the grunts that many fans are hoping would return someday, because on the horizon, some changes were coming for these little guys. By the time Halo 3 hit store shelves, a new generation of Xbox was here to roll out the red carpet. This meant the Halo series would be seeing many improvements to things such as materials, lighting, AI, and of course, increased production value. This brings us to the Grunts of Halo 3. First off, the grunts' foreheads have been enlarged and their now red eyes were moved to the sides of the head to give them a bit more of a prey/animal look. Their limbs were also mangled up a bit, stripped of toes and claws to give them more of an exoskeletal crustaceous look. Their combat harnesses also saw minor tweaks, with the mask filters being comically oversized and subtle tweaks to the geometry of things. This new crab-like body for the grunts also came with a new set of clumsy animations that gave the grunts an almost tippy-toe style walk that looks quite funny, especially when a large horde of them can be seen hobbling towards the player thanks to the power of the new console. The models were also made more reactive to player inputs. A well-placed shot or punch can occasionally knock their methane tank off their back or their gas mask off their face, revealing their horrifying teeth. As a clever gameplay and storytelling choice, the grunts can also now pull out 2 grenades and attempt to take the player down with them, which adds a fun twist to the gameplay and reflects the incredibly tragic religious indoctrination the grunts have been subjected to. More big-name talent was also brought in to do recordings for the various Halo characters. But what of the grunts?
Poor you! Stolen at the age of 6 and conscripted into the military. Look at me! I'm an epic space adventure hero with a little foofy love story. Oh, someone stole my AI! I'm so lonely! Where is she? I hope she's not hurt.
They're pretty funny. With Roy Stanton, Chris Edgerly, Mark Fullerton, and of course, Joseph Thundergun Staten bringing the little squirts to life, upping the comedic writing to heights never before seen. In a rather smart bit of detail, Marty O'Donnell, composer and sound designer on Halo 3, decided to begin adding a voice filter to all alien species in Halo to make them sound a little bit less human and more alien.
Stop staring at me. The hell's wrong with you?
The grunts of Halo 3 are probably the most alien-sounding of the games where the grunts speak English. In keeping with tradition, a special dialogue grunt can be found on the final level. This one is a combination of the 2 prior grunts, combining unusual confidence with deeply entrenched terror. He begins by berating the player, before eventually revealing his bluff and begging for the player to save his life.
I'll polish your boots. I'll polish your helmet. It's the gas. When I'm on the gas, I don't know what I'm doing half the time.
With the collapse of the Holy Covenant, the grunt race would be presented with a choice: carve a path for themselves in the cosmos, or kiss up to whoever scared them the most. But before we see where the future would take these little crab monkeys, we need to dip into Halo's past. Halo Reach was the final Halo game developed by Bungie. It was a swan song to the series, featuring many callbacks, references, and emotions wrapped up in a gritty, militaristic package. Set during the military campaign of Planet Reach, the art and tone of the game was noticeably more serious than the balance between comedy and drama that the series was known for up to this point. The Covenant saw changes to reflect their more serious tone. Mainly, the Covenant now speak their own languages, which are completely foreign to our Earth ears. The scratchy, energy-filled babbling of the grunts was replaced with a deeper, alien barking and chattering, and their design was also slightly tweaked to reflect the increase in detail that the Reach engine provided. The basic body design of the Halo 3 grunt was kept, but with greatly improved textures and materials to make their bony, exoskeletal look more pronounced, and some whitish coloration around their face. For the miner, the classic triangle was changed to a more rounded, shell-like design, with big, glowing ports for refilling the methane whenever it runs low. The Spec Ops grunt saw a set of combat goggles and more fin-like methane tanks, and grunts such as the Heavy and the Ultra make use of a cylindrical container for their methane, which is actually a reference to cut concept art for Combat Evolved. That's pretty cool. And speaking of that Grunt Ultra, The Grunt Ultras have this beautiful white armor and full facial covering to protect the Napoleonic alien inside. An interesting bit of trivia is that the Ultra rank is quite rare among Grunts due to how high their death rate is. This means the Ultras seen in-game are the Grunts' equivalent of a battle-hardened veteran. Due to this, they seem to have some behavioral changes, such as swiping the Jackal's ability to overcharge their plasma pistol, and being able to survive a single headshot, which would instead break off their helmet. Giving the Grunts abilities that other units have could be seen as the Grunts overstepping and misunderstanding their role in combat, but due to the fact it's relegated to just a single Grunt means that it's pretty balanced, at least in Reach. The models that Reach had for the Grunts were also so high in quality that they became the go-to look for most Grunts and armors going forward, with future Halo projects even straight up reusing the models, such as the remasters of Halo 1 and Halo 2. The Grunts of Halo Reach may have been less relatable due to their alien dialect, which was still delivered by Joe Staten, believe it or not, but with the incredible animation quality and behaviors, it ensured that these Reach Grunts became a fan-favorite incarnation, and with the added mechanic of their methane tanks exploding, which causes them to fly around the environment comically, yeah, they're pretty fun to fight. The campaign even made sure to give them their own spotlight moment when the player, low on ammo and health, is forced to navigate a building full of fanatical Grunt suicide squads. It was a moment that stuck with many players and is one of the best moments of the Reach campaign. The Grunts of Halo Reach were Bungie's goodbye to these little guys before embarking on a great journey of their own. But for the Grunts, changes were on the horizon. Changes that would prove a bit controversial. For years behind the scenes, a new era for Halo was being built. The Reclaimer saga would be a new start for the Halo universe after Halo Reach had concluded. It would feature a new story direction, a new art style, musical direction, and game design sensibilities. Many of the assets for Halo 4 and the Reclaimer saga were designed to translate into next-gen hardware seamlessly, with a focus on extreme detail and model complexity. The concept art for the game initially envisioned the Grunts looking much more faithful to the series' history, and many prototypes for Halo 4 also used Reach's animation rig, but for the final game, their biology and classic animation style was completely changed, ditching that crustacean look in favor of something a bit like a cross between a rhino and an alligator. The Grunts of Halo 4 no longer have an exoskeleton, and instead their new leathery skin is thick and hangs off their body, giving the Grunt a noticeable turkey neck. The formerly spindly and goofy limbs are now oversized, with meaty arms that drag along the ground, and longer legs and big feet that the Grunt no longer struggles for balance on, giving the new Grunts a heavy, stomping animation when they walk rather than the classic hobble that the Grunts were known for. Their heads and necks are also significantly bigger than before, and the classic baby pacifier gas masks the Grunts always wore were replaced with a breathing tube inserted into the Grunt's nose, revealing their disturbing mouths and now razor-sharp teeth visible for all to see. The classic triangle methane tank was also changed to be more organic in design, and when stepping back, the lighter skin and new combat harness for these Grunts make them appear to be almost wearing a tank top with no pants. It's a really odd look for the Grunts. It's also worth noting that, like many models in Halo 4, the new developers seemed to struggle quite a bit with optimization and had to downgrade many of the game's textures and materials, making the Grunts' textures in Halo 4 much lower in quality than those found in Halo Reach. Reflecting their more monstrous design, their voices were also made more hissy. And their animations were made heavier and less exaggerated and expressive. They're also much less interactive with their environment, opting for a rather unimpressive boost jump, replacing that desperate and personality-filled scramble they do to get over objects in the Bungie titles. Their backpacks can no longer be destroyed, which makes them seem less reactive to player shots, and they were also all uniformly given the ability to overcharge plasma pistols, which makes them more of a nuisance than previous games, since they'd be EMPing the player's shields and vehicles alongside the Jackals. They were also given the ability to super combine the player with just a few needler shots, which led to many cheap deaths. The Halo 4 Grunts deviated from that how your kid brother would play Halo cannon fodder enemy design and became just an annoying, irritating mob. a thorn in the combat loop. The Halo 4 incarnation of the Grunts didn't land well. It's no doubt an excellent bit of creature design from Kyle Heffley, but the spirit of the original Grunt got lost in the thick skin folds and heavy, less expressive animations of this new creature. The combat for them wasn't fun, and the creature itself was far too removed from what Halo Grunts are. Attempts were made to open people up to this design, such as retroactively adding them to the Human Covenant War in the Fall of Reach animated series, or a humorous commercial for Halo MCC that saw a Halo 4 Grunt during the original Halo trilogy. Rather humorously, this commercial tried to soften up the Grunts' eyes, make their teeth a little bit less scary, but the damage was done. This design was just repeatedly rejected by the Halo community. It's probably the lowest point of the Grunts' grunty career, a deviation too far from the essence that made people fall in love with them back in 2001. If the Reclaimer Saga Grunt wanted to stick around, changes would need to be made. Halo fans are nothing if not passionate. The community's displeasure with the Halo 4 Grunts was something inescapable at the time. Threads were made about the biology of the Grunt species, why they looked the way they looked in previous games, and even though Halo 5 was well into development by that time, the new studio 343 was very open to the reception of Halo 4, and made attempts to course correct. The Reclaimer Saga aesthetic was staying, but smart changes could be made to the existing models to at least nudge them in a better direction, even if they couldn't change them outright. This is where we arrive at the Grunts of Halo 5. The Grunts of Halo 5 completely lose the leathery hide of their predecessors and sport, once again, a crustacean exoskeleton, giving their body a crab-like texture. Their body itself was also darkened to be more in line with the Grunts of the older games, and the face was modified to be a bit less scary looking and a bit more goofy looking. The small eyes were now blown up, and the teeth were modified to appear less razor-like and more crooked and goofy. It gave the Grunts these dopey, vacant stares that is a bit unsettling looking, but it is an improvement. Just never look up the official renders on ArtStation. It's nightmare fuel. In terms of their gameplay, the Grunts of Halo 5 still lack that same level of interactivity and comedic hijinks. They still elephant stomp around and lazily boost jump on top of tall crates instead of physically and comedically scrambling up them. But with the extra horsepower of the Xbox One, the ability to detonate their methane tanks was brought back, turning these little gremlins into beautiful next-gen rockets with excellent special effects and asset work for their destroyed tanks. Seriously, this is really good-looking stuff. There are a couple of rough spots though, mainly the overly optimized nature of Halo 5's game engine to get a flawless 60 frames per second. Up close, enemy animations may appear fluid and readable, but if those enemies get just a few feet away from the player, the engine will begin cutting down the frame rate of enemy animations, and it makes them look almost like stop motion, or like an evil animated GIF that's shooting at you. It makes the enemies of Halo 5 appear very out of sync with the game world, and it makes it harder to get a read on Covenant body language, which in a franchise designed around expressive and readable body language probably wasn't the smartest design choice. It led to Halo 5's enemies feeling unintentionally robotic and stiff, and the consensus within the community is that combat with Covenant in Halo 5 is just off. It's a feeling of offness that's also amplified by the Grunts' new ability to melee and shove back the player if they get too close. Teaching players to not get close to Grunts and melee them feels so counter to their design, at least to me though. You know what wasn't off about the Halo 5 Grunts? The writing. Because the Grunts were back to speaking English, and the writing team for Halo 5 killed it. They may still be the lumbering trolls from Halo 4, but they are the classic Grunts in spirit. The Grunts' new voice cast was comprised of, at the time, 343 writer Nick Ardizone, voice actor Sean Chepluk, and of course the man himself, Joe Staten. This is me interjecting here. There's also theories that Anthony Hansen and Donovan Patton voiced some of the Grunts, but I can't get any concrete confirmation, so if anyone knows more, please reach out. The game even returned an old tradition for Halo. Joe Staten voiced one of the most infamous Grunts in the game, Dimki Hote, a very old Grunt who has been through the worst of the Halo universe. He can be found on a cliff in the mission Alliance, explaining to a tired elite his thoughts on the Halo universe. He's often found breaking the fourth wall, and even at times seems to notice the artistic change in the Halo universe.
So, how come you figure stuff looks different sometimes. Do you remember being more purpler? I do. Maybe just my eyes getting smarter, but I swear sometimes it's like there's a whole spaceship is different. Nobody says anything.
In the Warzone mode, new Grunt types were added via updates and DLC, such as the Grunt Bodyguard, which had an elite shield protecting it. But one of the biggest shakeups to the Halo 5 Grunts came in the form of a new Covenant enemy, the Grunt Goblin. A hackathon is a common tradition in most game companies. Essentially, teams are formed and told to just go nuts and develop something cool. It helps boost morale and re-energizes the creativity of developers during burnout periods. During an internal hackathon, a group of 10 343 employees made a simplistic model and hacked it into the Halo 5 Grunt animation skeleton. They gave it a tracking attack, gave it a secondary weapon, and when it was shown off, it was received so well that it was fast-tracked and properly developed into an enemy type for Halo 5's Warzone mode. The Grunt Goblin is a mech designed to look a bit like a robotic Reclaimer Saga Grunt. The canopy is protected by a shield. It carries a massive needler or beam cannon on its right arm, and the walk cycle was designed to be a robotic mirror of the Halo 5 Grunt's trademark Stomp Walk. This design was pioneered in-universe by the great Grunt theologian Ang-Nap-Nap the Enlightened, who preached that the ancient Forerunners were not a humanoid race, but in fact very similar to the Halo 5 Grunts in size and appearance. This belief was spread throughout the Grunt population, and the Grunt Goblin was a holy vehicle, constructed by the Grunts to be the spitting image of what they believed their Forerunner gods really looked like. The pilot of the Grunt Goblin is quite confident in his role, yelling insults at the player over his loudspeaker and announcing his attacks in a very anime-like style, which is fitting due to the Goblin itself being inspired by mecha anime. Initially, the Grunt Goblin was a very hard boss to fight, not giving the player a lot of visual feedback on when it was being damaged and feeling a bit more like a tedious bullet sponge. A problem I should mention is not exclusive to the Grunt Goblin. In an update, 343 added a slew of new Goblin types, as well as improving the visual damage feedback of the enemy. Improving the art of an enemy post-launch was something new for 343, and it greatly improved the experience of fighting the Grunt Goblin. While the Goblin was never able to shake off that Destiny bullet sponge vibe that Warzone gave a lot of its enemies, the charisma of the Grunt Goblin's production made it a standout boss fight in Warzone and an instant hit with fans. The Grunts of Halo 5 are strange, ugly creatures, but when combining their hideous appearance with the excellent writing and vocal work, it's easy to understand why they do have their fans. They don't have the animations and design of the traditional Halo Grunts, but there's something strangely likable about these goofy trolls. Outside of the mainline games, the Grunts made various appearances over the years. In the anniversary remakes of Halo 1 and 2, Reach Grunts were used due to the quality of those models actually standing the passage of time. For the CGI cutscenes of Halo 2 Anniversary specifically, Blur Studios had a very high-quality version of the Reach Grunt that they put to great use. Due to the hyper-realistic visuals, the more slapstick and cartoonish animations couldn't work, so a lot of time was spent giving the Grunts of these cutscenes the same theatrical and comedic qualities of their Bungie counterparts, but with enough weight to make them appear realistic. What's interesting is that Halo 2 Anniversary wasn't Blur Studios' first time doing the Grunts in CGI. 5 years earlier, Blur Studios did the cutscenes for Halo Wars, and this is where a completely different version of the Grunts can be found. They are noticeably thicker than the standard Grunts and have very disturbing human-like fingers. Oof. The game's sequel, Halo Wars 2, released about a year and a half after Halo 5. Mostly due to personal preference, the art team chose not to use the Halo 5 Grunt design. They instead went back to the drawing board and gave fans back the classic Grunt design. But the Reclaimer Saga Grunt wasn't thrown out with the bathwater entirely, because in a rather classy move, they took that ugly little troll that the community hated, redesigned its body to be a bit more grunty with the comical short legs, the super broad shoulders, and you know what? it works. It's a pretty good redesign of the Reclaimer Saga Grunt, and in the final game, they can be seen as the Suicide Grunt Squad. The Grunt Goblin makes a return in Halo Wars 2 as well, sporting a banished coat of paint. A cyborg grunt was planned to appear, which would have looked like a robotic Spec Ops grunt, but the crown jewel of Halo Wars 2 definitely had to be the game's best multiplayer character. Yap Yap the Destroyer was a joke character introduced in Halo Wars 2's DLC. He used to be a janitor in the Covenant before being abducted by the Banished and taken to the setting of Halo Wars 2, the Ark. It's there where he discovered a magical throne that whispered to him that it was his destiny to rule. Using the throne's magical powers, he launched a war against both the Banished and UNSC during the Yappening event. Eventually, Yap Yap's powers grew so mighty that he crossed over into Halo the Master Chief Collection, taking over its main menu temporarily and the matchmaking and challenge system. I was there when this happened, and it was kind of crazy. In the world of Halo comics, grunts have been portrayed with varying levels of consistency. Occasionally, you get absolute gems such as the community short story comic Age of Ungoy, done by Justin Grosjean, which depicts a rogue grunt taking it upon himself to enact vengeance upon some evil human marines. The line work is intense, and the whole short story is incredibly powerful from a visual standpoint. I recommend giving it a read. More often than not though, when rushed for time, artists are forced to make compromises or even mistakes, such as Halo's official comics on occasions. In the story Last Voyage of Infinite Succor, the artist seems to have misinterpreted the grunts' masks as a pig-like snout, and in Halo Collateral Damage, the art occasionally depicts the grunts as, I don't know man, tiny men in potato costumes? In the world of internet memes, Halo Infinite's initial gameplay reveal was probably most known for the poster child of 2020, arguably, Craig the Brute. According to 343, Craig the Brute is actually an alien rock god. He and his grunt audio engineer riff slap journey across the cosmos, spreading music into the hearts of everyone. During Halo's real-world Outpost Discovery event, life-size charts for the Covenant species could be found, giving the world a look at the real-world size of the grunts. And it turns out they're quite big. In fact, a specific picture of yours truly went viral here. That's me standing right there next to a grunt. In 2021, 343 released the latest entry in the Halo series, Halo Infinite. It acts as a soft reboot for the Halo universe, bringing the music, art, sound, and tone more in line with the franchise's roots. The game itself was quite hard for the developers to get out the door, and cracks unfortunately do show in the final product. But the Halo community and gaming at large was in agreement on one thing. The grunts of Halo Infinite were a proper return to form. Halo Infinite's grunts are an interesting fusion of the eras, but unmistakably, these creatures are true to spirit Halo grunts. When looking at the body, it has a similar skeletal structure to the Reclaimer Saga grunts, with that slouched look, the smaller chests, and the longer limbs. This was most likely done so that the model could be used with the Halo 5 animation rig, which is a smart way to save on resources, but there are a couple of changes made to make the body a bit less Halo 5-y, such as making the limbs less swollen, and also redesigning the head so that it's more in line with the grunt's normal biology. Their equipment was also redesigned to be a hybrid of Halo Reach and Halo 3, which is obvious in the return of their iconic gas masks and that Reach-style methane pack. Rather interestingly, 343 seems to have reused an old Halo 1 idea with the gas mask being colored orange. This hybrid design landed extremely well with the fans, with many in agreement it's one of the best looks for the grunts. But what went down even better was the work put into bringing them to life. Many of the Halo 4 and 5 animations were thrown out and replaced with new, more expressive and comedic animations to give the grunts a bit more of that classic charm. Gone was the cave troll stomp walk, and in was a goofy, out-of-breath comedic jog. During gameplay, the Halo Infinite grunts are extremely readable with strong coloration and animation quality, making them quite easy to predict and fight against. Their backpacks can still be destroyed, which sends them hilariously flying around with excellent special effects, but that's not just the end of it, because a couple of new abilities were added to their arsenal. Occasionally, suicide grunts can be just punted by fellow brutes in a courageous attempt to take the player down. Check the skies. The Grunts of Halo Infinite wouldn't be half as much fun to fight though if it weren't for the incredible writing and vocal talent. Halo 5 was an incredible experience for those who like grunt humor, and Halo Infinite took grunt humor to new heights never before seen.
Maybe it's the lack of methane I've been getting lately, but last night when I was picking mush meat out of my gums, bam! It came to me. The poems. You know, like a group of song words. You want to hear it? Promise you won't laugh? Okay. I did a thing that I'm going to do and stranded on a circle. A thing that once was taught to me by my poor Uncle Blurkle. He said, be brave and duck your head when humans try and shoot. 'Cause if you don't, you'll just end up all splattered like a fruit. With confidence, I listened hard and did just what he said. And by the nipple's saving grace, I didn't end up dead.
New units such as the Grunt Mule seem very old and tired with the UNSC and humanity, while the Grunt Miners seem a lot more plucky and eager to prove themselves, only for it all to be thrown out the window as they flee in terror under the slightest bit of stress. Halo Infinite is a game full of strong NPC dialogue and combat lines, but the grunt writing was so well regarded in Halo Infinite that it was all anyone was writing about back in December of 2021 when the campaign launched. Following the removal of the game's previous director, the man himself, the Grunt, Joe Staten, was brought in to get the game out the door following the announcement of a year-long delay. In that year, many things about the game were improved, such as the Marine AI experience and the quality of the visuals. But Joe Staten also brought to life a new character for the series, a grunt propaganda officer whose speakers litter the surface of Zeta Halo. This officer is confident in the Banished's control over humanity, urging humans to give up and surrender. But as you destroy more speakers and take back more of the ring, his mood sours, and eventually, he just begins using the speaker system as an excuse to complain about Halo, about the player, about the Banished, and sometimes he even begs for the player to free him.
Attention, all remaining banished forces. We need fresh blood. So, we're kicking off a recruitment drive. Call up your buddies and sign them up. Just don't tell them about our recent, setbacks. Hey, we got a Craig out there? I keep hearing about some loser named Craig. Why the heck do you get all the attention? We're just as cool, if not way cooler.
At the time of writing, Halo Infinite's polish and content lineup is quite rough, but the game's dialogue and campaign is widely regarded as one of the best parts of the game, and the grunts were there, leading the charge. Halo Infinite's grunts are a worthy return to form. It's a design for the grunts that 343 can truly call theirs, and it's someone who is personally biased towards that classic broad-shouldered, tiny-legged look for the grunts. I don't mind these guys, and I wouldn't mind seeing them in future Halo adventures. It's good to see you, old friends. The grunts are back. Halo's grunts are wonderful creatures. Their short stature, tendency to flee, and hilarious dialogue makes them a selling point of any Halo campaign. There's been so many iterations and takes on these little guys, but which is your favorite incarnation of the grunts? Let me know down below. It helps out the YouTube algorithm, helps out the channel, and consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video around if you enjoy it. I also want to thank folks who helped make this video come together, such as Really Good Gaming, Chris Aiken, Little Opie, Rejected Shotgun, Isaac Hannaford, and so many more. Also, a big thank you to the channel supporters. You guys helped me keep on keeping on. This video was a celebration of the Grunts of Halo, and it was fantastic fun to make. But you're all waiting for my grunt impression, right? Alright, here we go.
Good thing that food nipple's waiting for me at the starship, 'cause man, have I worked up a big grunty thirst!